Good morning, everybody. How you doing? Let us adjust the view here. Boom. There we go. Right on. All right. Let me just double check the levels. We are streaming live again on LinkedIn. It is apparently Big Hair Monday. I really have to do something with this. So we are continuing our march down to AWS Reinvent. Okay, we are live here on LinkedIn. If you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, please comment below. I will circle back as I do with every one of these videos and address whatever your questions are in the next stream. But the idea here is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. We're going to touch on areas of the AWS cloud that you may not be familiar with. Reason being, we have 69 days from this Monday right now up until when Reinvent kicks off in December. Yes, that's a very, very long way away. But there's a ton of different things to watch, to learn, to understand, to comprehend, to kind of get the most out of Reinvent. I really want you to get the most out of Reinvent. I think it's a fantastic conference. I think everybody who goes has a blast, and I think you can learn a lot. So we covered, last time we covered AWS Lambda, which is a critical service that I'm sure we're gonna be actually bouncing back and forth to a bunch of times. It's just that important. But some of the feedback I got talking to people was that it might've been a little too much. Because people maybe weren't used to, Jesus, it's just getting worse. People who weren't used to talking about programming, they weren't used to kind of getting their hands dirty, diving in and doing stuff. Even though we set up something pretty straightforward, pretty simple, I think the takeaway was that's cool. We see and understand sort of how this can be a benefit. But let's ease into it a little bit more. Let's cover some other areas. So I thought, hey, you know what? Today we're going to cover the command line. And, you know, I am apparently your crazy professor because every time I touch my hair, it gets worse. Impressive feat, I know. But we're going to talk about the command line. So I'm going to switch over to my screen. We're going to make sure it's showing the right one. Cool. All right. So I'm going to be looking primarily at my display, but I'll come back for key points to you guys here in the camera. We are going to give ourselves a little bit less time today. What we're going to do is we're going to put some time up on this clock. Make sure it's the right day. We're going to say, let's go to 25 minutes after the hour. So 20 minutes on the clock. Dun, dun. I need to add sound effects. I've got a stream deck. I should put sound effects into this to make it a little cooler. But this is what we set up last time. We set up a Lambda function that helped us every time we dropped something into an S3 bucket. It fired off an event into the logs telling us what we put in. So I think that was pretty straightforward. Like I said, I got some feedback that led to today's topic, which is the command line. So if you have questions as we're going along, please fire it off in LinkedIn. I have it. That browser set up so that I can see the quality of what's going on there. Just going to double check the stream quality here, which seems to be good. So we are going to talk about the AWS command line interface. Let me adjust. There we go. Okay. So the command line interface, or CLI, is a tool that you type into, wait for it, the command line. This is present on pretty much every AWS managed AMI, specifically the Amazon Linux AMI. It's present in a bunch of default things that you find. So Beanstalk, it's present on a lot of default containers. It's present, I think, in Lambda. I'm not 100% sure on that one. I'll have to double check. But essentially, it's a tool that lets you manipulate or work with AWS services. Now, why would you want to do this from the CLI? Well, because it's pretty straightforward and simple. It's a little less complicated than programming, but there's a really cool and interesting thing about the command line interface. The command line interface is actually a complete and near perfect mirror of the application programming interface, of the APIs that run AWS. So we saw in last week's episode, the last episode of the show, we were looking at Lambda, and we were doing some things within Lambda based on actions that happened within the AWS API. So let me flip back to that console. So you see here, when S3, we added a trigger that meant anytime anyone called the put API, so putting an object into S3. An API was called to do that, and then we reacted to that. Well, the command line interface lets us call that API. We can actually put an object into S3 from the API if we want. We can also do anything else. So the way the AWS API works is, like I said, it's that mirror image of the command line interface. So I've got a couple examples that I wanted to walk through to show you, but if you want to see something done or me to stumble around and fail doing something, please fire it off in the comments here on LinkedIn, and we'll tackle it. But essentially this is a standard solution. You can install it, you can see here on Mac and Linux, you can install it from Python directly. It does run in Python. If you don't have that set up, you can use Homebrew on Python on Mac. To install it. On Windows, you can install it through the installer, so you can just download and run the 64-bit or the 32-bit. And once you have it installed, let me up the font size here, you are going to need to add some credentials. So you can add credentials every time you run a command. It's a pain in the butt. What you can do is actually create a credential file that keeps things saved, and that's actually the default when you start up. Let me come back to this here. So configuration and credential files. This is going to save your access key and secret key for the account that you configure in a profile, so you don't always have to add it. Now, if you're running the CLI in the AWS cloud, so from an EC2 instance, your permissions get assigned through a role, and that's a lot easier to handle. But what we've done is I've already set up this profile file. So you can see here, very fancy, access key, secret key, and then you put your access key and secret key that you get from creating a user. And you can set up your default regions and your default output. So that's a one-time activity. You guys can figure that out. They've got great help files to do that. But what I wanted to show you here was a very simple example of an AWS command. So AWS triggers the AWS CLI. In this case, you're calling a service S3, and then CP, copy, just like it is on Linux, just like it is on Mac. Copy this local file, myvideo.mp4, into this bucket, S3:// my bucket. Pretty straightforward. So AWS in S3, copy this to that. Very, very easy. That is a great example of something that works nice and simply, right? So if we go to our S3, we have a road to reinvent bucket. Let me pull up my command line. Make sure that you guys can see this. So I'm going to switch programming over to, streaming over to iShare. I'm going to turn off my logo. There we go. Okay. Let me up the font size a bit here. So if I just simply type, clear that, AWS, you see it pulls up the help, right? It takes a second and it goes, well, wait a minute, do you want help? I could do that. I could say, give me some help. And then you'll see it'll just start to automatically page in the command line. So AWS command line unified tool, great. It gives us the default parameters and how to set this up. Very, very simple. We're going to quit out of that, push Q to quit. We're going to copy that same command. We're going to say AWS S3 CP, and I have a file on my desktop that I'm going to copy to S3: road to reinvent. And we're going to flip over real quick. So I've got that queued up. I already have this file in here. We're going to delete it. Delete that file. Yes, yes. Okay, so the bucket is empty, makes a little smoother demo. Now that we come back here, so AWS, great, we're invoking the command line tool. S3 is the service we're talking to. CP is short for copy because it lines up with Windows and Linux and Unix. We're going to copy this file from my desktop. So it's a ad for a course I did on mastering the well architecture framework. S3, we're going to add the 3. S3. Name of the bucket, road to reinvent. Now, if I hit enter, fingers crossed, this should work. I think I have it configured correctly. And you see my firewall is actually going to ask me to make sure I can allow that. Upload. So desktop, that file name, to road to reinvent, that file name. So if I flip back to my browser, flip you guys back to my browser. So here we have that bucket. If I simply click the refresh button on the bucket, voila, we have copied a file to S3. That's it. Rocket science, right? It's amazing, super simple. There's a ton of options, obviously, when you're copying things into S3, but very simple, very basic. Here, what we've done is used the command line to push a file into S3. Now, we know from last time, that could trigger a whole bunch of actions, right? So the reason why I'm showing you this is uploading something into S3, It's an image. We could have sent this to a number of other services to process that image, to do something with that image. If we'd sent a document, we could do the same. If we've sent a video, we could do a bunch of stuff with having a really straightforward interface for people, right? Just command line, just type this command and you're good, or copy this command and you're good. So you don't have to have everything crazy complicated, right? So I read an article this morning where someone was trying to create a serverless API for some internal usage. And the interesting thing they had was they were saying, well, it's costing them an arm and a leg. Well, they could have used an S3 bucket instead of an endpoint. So instead of giving a fancy web page for users to upload from, if it's just an internal team thing, like you need somebody to transfer a file or to kick off a workflow, we just typed in one quick word or command and we were off to the races. So I'm going to show you why this might be useful. We're going to search for AWS Translate. So Translate, I always hesitate showing Google when I'm on a live stream, but always useful. So Translate, very, very simple, very straightforward. Take something from one language, flip it into another language with reasonably decent accuracy. It's still machine translation, but it gets the point across. So any AWS service has a landing page like you're looking at right now. It explains the marketing positioning of it. So you get Amazon Translate, a one-word, quick blurb, natural and accurate language translation. Could have guessed that from the name Amazon Translate, but there are a bunch of services that their names don't line up. You'll then get the marketing pitch, the longer pitch about what's going on with let me just kill my notifications here. With the service, you'll normally see some sort of launch video or customer attestation, benefits, and then use cases, right, and customer references. It's the same setup for every AWS landing page, and that's actually really, really useful. But what we want here is across this top bar. So we see Amazon Translate, overview, features, pricing. Pricing is important. Let's just double check. I don't like running up a random bill. So we're going to be in the free tier because I haven't sent anything to translation this month, and 2 million characters per month for 12 months. So this is an account that's set up still with the free tier, but even after that, it's only $15 per million characters. So if we send a few characters, I love when they do these fractions of a penny because you just have no idea. $15 per million characters. That's a ton of stuff to throw through Translate. So we're good here. We're going to be in a fraction. We should be in the free tier. We may get into a fractional charge. But what I really wanted to call out, and I'm sure I've said that already several times, is resources. So at the top, you see the service name, overview, features, prices, resources. That will always send you to, if there's training available, but also the HTML and PDF versions of the documentation, the developer guide. Now, everyone kind of looks at it and goes, ooh, developer guide. I don't want to do that. I'm not a developer. But remember how we talked about the CLI, the command line interface, is a mirror of the API. The API is what developers use. So if we click on HTML, we're going to get to the web version, and we're actually going to flip over to the new look of the web version because this is snazzy. We get how all of this works, right? So we see here supported languages. We have a number of East Asian languages, Germanic languages. So we're going to start with a source language of English. We're going to flip that into maybe a Romance language of French, because at least I can give you a reasonable verification of that translation. But there's quite a few supported languages, which is really, really cool. Gotta love how Finnish gets its own classification. But then down here you have some things that don't work. So simplified to traditional Chinese and vice versa doesn't work. Korean to Hebrew will not work as a pair, Norwegian to Arabic or to Hebrew. For the record, in case you're wondering why I call it Finnish, from a linguistic perspective, Finnish is just fascinating. Everybody always asks, but my last name is actually Dutch. I'm a Dutch Canadian, 50% Dutch for the record. But yeah, we're going to go English to French. But if we look down, we understand the use cases. We're trying to translate some words real quick. This is, sometimes it's faster than doing Google Translate, but I think it's a really interesting sort of concept. Very simple service to work with from Amazon, right? You have supported languages, and we have language codes for that. So for English, it's EN. For French, it's FR. That's really what we need to know. You could have Translate automatically configure this if you want. Not a problem. We're going to click on Getting Started, and then you'll see there's a nice little trick here with Getting Started in the console. So we could go through the web and try it and see what spits out. But what we can really do is Getting Started with the console. We'll see the command line. So AWS Translate text. So you wonder, why is the double translate? Well, remember our CLI setup is very simple and very straightforward. AWS to trigger the CLI, name of the service, name of the action in the service. So for S3, we had AWS S3 CP for copy. For translate, we're going to AWS translate text is the name of the endpoint we're calling. That's the API call we're actually making a call for. So what we're going to do here, we're going to omit the region. We're going to have source language, target language, and some text. So let's flip back to our command line, which feels like this is more technical than last week, but really it's not, right? So translate text, and then I'm just going to double check I have the source code language. There we go. So double dash source code language, boom, is English. Double dash target language code is going to be French. Text is hello world. Fancy, exciting stuff, right? If you have questions, let me know. Hit me up on the stream here in LinkedIn. I am monitoring off to the side, but if we send this, so let's just review this command to make sure we're crystal clear. AWS to trigger the CLI. Translate is the name of the service we're dealing with. Translate text is the call we're actually making to the translate service. We're giving a source language of English, a target language of French, and we're saying hello world. And we wait, and we get the response, which if I hadn't mistyped would have been correct. Let me send that where hello doesn't have a W. Come on, stream. You saw that. Why didn't you stop me? You should have stopped me. Like I told you up front, we're going to make mistakes. That's a ridiculous mistake. I'm glad it was that kind of mistake to start with. If we say hello, it's going to then turn around and tell us our translated text is bonjour monde, which is crappy, but it's accurate. It's a 2-word translation. What you'll see with translation, similar to natural language processing when you're trying to figure out the meaning, is the more text you send it, the better. So if we go, this is from the live stream. So hello, this is from the live stream. Theoretically should have a better translation, but live stream is going to mess it up because this is where you're going to see where automatic translation generally sucks. In French, a lot of the time they use English words for technical stuff. A lot of the time they use literal translations, but there's an official list of French technology words that very few people use. So we'll see what pops up here. So translate text, English to French. Hello, this is from the live stream. If we hit this, bonjour, c'est de la diffusion en direct, which is, it's not bad. Let's try that again. Translate text with the source language code set to auto and the target language code set to Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, but let's see the difference. This is from the live stream. So language auto to target language. And here, hola, esto es de la transmisión en vivo. Vivo is live, so yeah, that sounds reasonable. But here what we've done is we've had it automatically detect and it's determined that this is actually English. That's it. Nice and simple. Pretty straightforward. Now you can send anything you want through to to the translator. So let's get a little more complicated because once you're in the command line, you're in this entire ecosystem of other command line things. What we're going to do is we are going to pull out a very simple thing. Let me flip back here. I'm just thinking on the fly. What I'm going to do is, text. Yeah. I'm just loading up a text editor in the background here and saving a file, sample.txt. Perfect. Okay. So, cool. What I've done is created a file that has a bunch of text in it, right? So, cat is catenate, I think. Who knows? Cat sends the contents of a file from the file to the command line just like it did here. So there are two ways to use the CLI in Amazon. I just copied work off of the page, the marketing page. My words are working just as well as my hair is this morning. As you can tell, disastrous. So what we're going to do is actually use a JSON file. So if I fire that up again, let me just open this. So I'm going to change this file a little bit. AWS Translate likes text files to be in a set format. So we are going to set this up properly. So again, I'm just maintaining the file in the background. It likes them as JSON documents. So that is a document with a little bit more format to it. I'm going to save this and I'll show you. Save as sample.json. There we go. All right. You can tell I don't plan this out. I'm going to have to start planning it out, I think, because I got 2 minutes left. So that's our sample desktop. If we do this, so now what we've done, you'll see the difference here is there's a bracket, there's a key and a value, and then a source language and a code. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to clear that out. So we're going to AWS Translate. Translate text would help if I could spell. CLI input JSON, and then in this case, file users markdown desktop sample .json. Now that should work. Nope. Because it did not find my user because I forgot one extra slash. So the way this works is this is a local. So we've done AWS translate text. Again, we're using a different input. This time we're using CLI command line interface input JSON file. Then you give it a full path to the file, starting with file : // then the full path. On Macs, full paths from the root start with that extra slash. If we do that, we're getting missing input target language code. So we did not specify in our sample what language code we wanted. We have a source code, but we don't have a target. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to add the target language. There we go. Target language code. And in this case, I think I remember my codes. We're going to double check. We're going to fire that command back. There we go. Perfect. So I sent it that same set, but in this case, I asked it to translate to Dutch, NL for Nederlands. So translated text, Eurozins fee manière om de CLI, blah, 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 blah. You do not want to see me pronounce this word because I'll probably spit up all over my lens. In Dutch, we love to roll our G's and our H's for some reason. But here we go. We've passed it a file, right? And that's worked well. But if we go back to our original ask, which is basically just sending it text directly, what you can actually do, and this may or may not work, again, we're trying, is pull that. This is totally a shot in the dark here, team. No. All right. So what you can do is figure out other ways to get text into there. And I think what I needed to do was slash or a little prime and another little prime. No, again, not working. Still, concept pretty straightforward. You have a command line. We're out of time here, but I wanted to highlight this. This is just a really simple and easy one. A really simple and easy one to do. You win, sometimes you lose. So there we go. So it seems very poignant in Spanish, but this is a quick introduction to the AWS CLI. So the CLI is a direct and complete mirror of the API, which means if you're not comfortable with programming or trying to learn each new service, the command line is really helpful. Also, if you just want to do one thing, the command line tends to be the fastest way. As we saw in our command to, I'm just scrolling up here, as we saw in our command right here, to copy a file from our local system into S3, very, very simple. AWS for the command line interface, S3 for the service, CP is a shortcut for copy to make it line up with the rest of the operating system, our local file into our destination bucket. That worked like a charm. We also played around a little bit with the translation feature. So again, here we have AWS Translate, which is our, so AWS for the command line, translate for the service we're calling, and then the endpoint we're calling is translate text. We gave it a source code. In this case, for the language, we said auto. We said, you figure it out, translate. Target, we did Spanish, we did French, we did Dutch, and then we gave it text. We gave it text from a configuration file. We also gave it text directly from the command line. Now, directly from the command line, when you remember, like I don't on a Monday with crazy hair and things aren't going well, when you remember how to pipe things into places on the command line, it's really simple and straightforward. You can then actually just pull from various files. Now, there are some limits around translation, and before we sign off, let's go to that real quick. Just with any AWS service, especially the ones around natural language, you are going to see that there are limits. Now, the good news is they're always documented. So we're back to our documentation here on the side, guidelines and limits. In this case, character encoding always needs to be UTF-8, which is the Unicode. Generally, for languages, that's what you need. That's how you keep all the diacritics, the accents, and the cool little things there. But here's the key. Document size. 5,000 bytes. You need to send smaller chunks of text. In fact, all of the examples that say like, hey, here's how you translate a web page. Here's how you translate a large document. They start by taking the document and breaking it up into smaller pieces that get under the 5,000 byte limit. Now you can fire off custom terminology and stuff within the service. There's a bunch of stuff that is in Amazon Translate that we didn't touch because we were just looking for an example. But the key takeaway here is that the CLI is really handy. Once you set it up, if you're not in the AWS cloud, so if you're running it locally on a laptop or an iMac or whatever, you'll need an access key and a secret key. If you're running it in the AWS cloud, your role will dictate what you can do. And then remember, it's AWS, name of the service, name of the endpoint, then a bunch of options. It's a direct mirror of the programming interface, which makes life really easy and simple for a lot of stuff. And it's a great way to learn and kind of play around and poke at the different AWS services. I hope this has been useful. I know this was a little crazy. I mean, it's reflective of my hair. It's Monday. But I mean, for me, this also highlights the spirit of these streams leading up to Reinvent are really just casual, learning something together, making some mistakes. You saw me mistype a bunch of stuff. It happens to all of us. That's no reason not to learn. Just keep moving forward. Roll with it. Learn from your mistakes, and you can accomplish some cool stuff. This morning, we copied a file from the command line to a locally to S3, and we translated some text. Real simple, real easy. We did that in 25, 30 minutes, with really... no prior coffee, which is like no prior experience. Let me know here on LinkedIn. Let me know on YouTube what you guys want to see next. I got a bunch of plans. I am publishing a schedule hopefully this week that's actually tied to another effort to update my website. As a reminder, I have published the Ultimate Guide to AWS Reinvent 2019. I publish this every year. This is this year's. Hit it up on A Cloud Guru. I'll put the link here in LinkedIn. Ultimate Guide. So you guys can see that. Basically, it goes through what's what at the show, what you should be looking for. Next big milestone coming up in the next few weeks is reserving seats for sessions. We're going to be talking about that live on the stream when the time comes. But get prepared by now by reading the guide. Go in and star the sessions you're interested in. This is going to be an amazing conference. Hopefully, following me on the streams leading up to the conference is going to give you even more of an edge. Learn even more stuff. Thanks for joining me as always. I will catch you guys on the next episode of this later this week. Keep those comments coming up. I do review them and then add that to either the content calendar or tackle it on the next segment. So we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for joining me early Monday. Have a great one.